some time for the chat questions to pile up a little bit by just digging right into the post questions.
So we're just we're just checking out the last Epoch dev stream here, so I won't be making a whole lot of commentary until afterwards.
A little less than a month ago, about like 3 weeks ago, and one of the major aspects of that was it came out with Chapter 10. Chapter 10 has been in development for quite a while, a lot of off and on stuff as we just kind of kept on rearranging, priorities. But we finally got Chapter 10 out. We finally got another extension to the campaign. It had a lot of big revelations, a lot of big lore moments that I've been eager for people to get exposed to for a very, very long time. So that's one of the reasons why I felt it was a good idea to have a nice little lore stream now that we have more things for people to ask questions about finally for first time in quite a while. So, yeah, with that little kind of preamble, I'll go ahead and get into some of our post questions. So we have this first one from Oinos, a question around Revenant Yulia and Immortal Empire. The Immortal Empire is 1,000 years after the event of the Ancient Era campaign. It's actually 1,000 years after the Divine Era, but close enough. We can see on the map that Stellarum became the Immortal Citadel, and Yulia looks pretty much the same in both eras. So actually, if you look at her model between her Divine Era appearances and her Imperial Era appearances, she does have some differences. More of a kind of zombified, kind of undead look. It's not as drastic as, say, like Harn or Zarek, and especially any other, like, undead character, but there is some kind of necrotic signs there. She's got kind of a bit of a zombified look, and actually, one of the things that's going to happen between now and the end of the campaign, and one of our updates in the future, we are going to revamp her undead model a little bit to kind of give it more of some like differences, make it look a little, like change the look a little bit to kind of, hit the necrotic vibe in a different angle. But yes, so if you look at her portrait right here that Mike has up, she does have that kind of withered, kind of zombified look. So there are differences between her and her kind of living divine self. They're just not quite as drastic as, like, say, Harn or Zarek's, and a big part of that is that she didn't get in as dire of a situation as Harn and Zarek did between the end of the Divine Era and what, people see in the Imperial Era.
Do you know where she is in the Divine Era that I can quickly go to?
Best one would be Heoboria over in Divine Era. So it'd be north on the map over to the, or right a little bit.
Oh, you're on a little bit of a delay there.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Where is she?
Actually, this is part of the campaign where she's already left here. Yeah, I wasn't sure where your campaign progression is at. Yeah, so if you're a little later on the fight, you were okay. So in that case, Majelka is probably gonna be the best place to find her. Oh well, she's actually there too.
Is she here?
Which scenes we have?
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, okay, the upper district. No, this works as well. Here, yeah, there's Divine Era Yulia right there, and yeah, so. Like, the differences aren't as drastic as some of the characters you see in both Divine and Imperial, but they do exist here. She does have some differences. So, yeah, so that, I hope, answers that question from Oinos. Okay, next question, we are going to stick with the post questions for a little longer, just going to get a little more build up on the stream questions. So we are going to dive into the Eagles zone from Eagles Forever. We got a nice little stack from Eagles, which is always glad to see that, always flattered. First one from Eagles Forever. Can you finally tell us who the Immortal Emperor is? No, still no. But I will say that with Chapter 10 being out, we are getting closer and closer to when that reveal will happen. The campaign is planned to have a Chapter 11 and a Chapter 12, and I can say confidently that the reveal of who the Emperor is will happen in 11 or 12. So
I thought you were going to say which chapter. I was so excited for a second there.
I mean, I'm trying to think how much of a... By the time you are in Chapter 12, by the time you're in Chapter 12, you should know who the Immortal Emperor is. I will say that.
All right.
So yeah, the answer is coming. We are a little closer than we were before, but I still am not at liberty to give out the answer.
All right then, keep your secrets.
Yeah. And just to make it a little more fair, I'm going to bounce between Eagles and this another person who dropped a good amount of questions in the post, Pon Poco. I'm going to bounce around between the two of them for a minute. So a question from Pon Poco. And was it humanity or the Elysians who were in a sort of cryo-sleep state in the Temple of Atera? So to give a little more context for that, people who might have, like, haven't, don't remember Chapter 10 too well, one of the big reveals in Chapter 10 is that you actually see inside the Temple of Atera before it fell to the ground. And one of the set pieces in the Temple of Atera in the Ancient Era is you see a bunch of these humanoid figures in these little, like, stasis pods. And some of the exposition you get there is that they were the Elysians, and that the Elysians were the ones who made the temple and made all that old technology. And to pretty much answer that question from Pon Poco, Elysians are humans. So the Elysians were essentially a civilization of humanity from before the Ancient Era. So the Elysians are a civilization of humanity from before the Ancient Era. Very highly advanced, very magically gifted, very much a kind of, that kind of like precursor sort of archetype. The kind of like, ancient civilization that fell and were at the height of everything before that fall. And so, yes, to answer Pon Poco's question, the humanity that we see in the later eras, they are essentially the Elysians that survived the fall of the temple, and humans and Elysians are the same. Is just a civilization of humanity, or who the Elysians were. Gonna bounce back up to Eagles for another one. Can you tell us more about the Cataclysm and the Elysians who came before? Will these topics be part of the story going forward, or just a starting point for Atera's pantheon? And I like that these questions kind of, feed into each other a bit. Part of the reason why I jumped around, not gonna lie. So, the Cataclysm and the Elysians who came before the Elysians were the pre-ancient era civilization of humanity that made a lot of the things you see that are kind of iconic to that kind of monolith tech, that kind of Temple of Atera tech. So they were the first with the part of humanity before the Ancient Era that kind of dominated the world and made all these big, impressive creations, including these like floating islands and these strange devices and everything. Oh, you died. Ouch.
I was going too fast, and I don't know what I clicked in the Nemesis UI. I think I hit Empower, but I don't know.
Ooh.
I hope so.
But back to the Elysians. So, like a lot of the sort of archetypes of these like pre-ancient, precursor civilizations, that the Elysians are kind of fitting in that mold. Part of that sort of archetype is that there's that fall where like they are around anymore, and that has been referred to in that little exposition you get in the temple as the Cataclysm. And I will say that there is there is a specific kind of idea of what that was. That is something that we're still holding back for future kind of a story updates and future plans of kind of diving into that more. I will say, to answer the question of will these topics be part of the story going forward, I will say that the campaign will not really dive back into the Elysians, and especially not the Cataclysm for the rest of the campaign. The campaign is going to be still focused on the things that came after, like the stuff with Raya, the stuff with the Mole Emperor, especially the stuff with Orbis. So the Elysians and the Cataclysm, that is more kind of like for the purposes of the campaign and the story that is being told right now. They are there to like give more context for the Observer and his fall, and for Atera and her situation and how that ties into the Observer and his fall. But that all being said, that's just pretty much clarifying that we won't be diving back into Elysian stuff in the campaign, but in the future, especially in a future, once we're past the threat of Orbis, that is absolutely fertile ground for diving into, those kind of mysteries. So it's something that I will say that we won't see more of in the campaign, like 11, chapters 11 and 12, but in the future, it is an area that we will want to explore further. Okie dokie, and gonna dive back down to Palm Poco for another Elysians question. Just gonna knock it out a bunch of these in one nice kind of contained segment. So back to Palm Poco, we have Etura said that she would wait for the Elysians' return. She also said that Elysians would be freed from the past and awaken. And there's a little sub question of what kind of disaster was it? I will go ahead and say, like, I don't want to reveal what the nature of that disaster was quite yet. That's something that I want us to dive into more when we do a, like, content expansion, whatever kind of like shape it takes, where we do dive into the Elysians and the actual kind of nature of what happened to them. So it's something that the what we can say now is pretty much the Elysians were the top dogs of the world at a point. They made all kinds of things. Something very terrible happened, and almost all of them are gone besides the ones that are contained in Eterra's temple in that stasis. So there is a big mystery there, and we will explore that at some point, but it'll be something for when we're diving into like story hooks after the campaign. And let's see here. Anything else on that question that I glossed over? Not quite. Okay. We've been bouncing around Eagles and Palm Poco for a minute, so I'm going to dive down to stream questions now and go ahead and grab a couple of those, because I'm sure some people have been antsy about their questions. But we'll be diving back into Eagles and Palm Poco intermittently as we go. I just want to get some, spread the love a little bit. Okay, so now we're in the stream questions zone for a minute. And first we have from Vincent Van Gogh. That's like 3 H's. Vincent Van Gogh. Hi, is there any hope for a review of the group play? When I port to my friend, I instantly die even before I can see the screen or interact with anything. Mike, I'm gonna bounce that to you if you don't mind.
I mean, that's just a straight up bug. Yeah, as soon as you spawn in, you have a grace period where you can't be hurt. And if that's not happening, please submit a bug report. F8 in game.
Seconding that. Yeah, that shouldn't be happening. That sounds like a very unfortunate experience, so we definitely don't want that to be the case. Next stream question from Cormag1. Hi, I recently found some woven cocoons in maps. What's up with that? I assume that's referring to the woven cocoons, unless, Mike, there's a low chance for one to spawn as a woven cocoon, and I just don't know about it. Does that ring a bell?
It sounds like a typo.
Gotcha. Yeah, in which case, yeah, those should all say woven cocoons. That is tying in with the Weaver and the whole Weaver's system. That is the big system we were introduced in 1.2, and there's a whole big kind of story there with this cosmic being called the Weaver, who is taking souls and cocooning them and trying to make her own woven. I'm not going to get into the whole like top to bottom explanation of like the lore behind the Weavers. It's actually not a typo. That is something that happens. I'd put money that's a Shisoki thing that slipped in. I was about to say, I know we have a tendency to have like little fun bits, like the wolves having random names. Sometimes the health potions will drop as beer or gruel milk, so that might just be a little jokey thing.
I think we can chalk that up to there's enough timelines happening that anything's possible. Just give it the old multiverse treatment.
Yeah, so I will say, like, I mean, I feel like it wouldn't be a typo, because like they should all just have the same name. If it was a typo, then like every one of them would be called woven cocoons, right?
I meant like a typo in the question, but yes.
Oh, right. Well, if it's a typo in the question, then
it's not.
Yeah, my answer still stands. It's part of the Weaver system, and to find out more about that, you can explore the tombs and cemeteries and meet a mysterious figure named, and he'll tell you all about the Weaver. Okay,
the woven ones, though, are just an Easter egg.
Right. Okay, I'm going to do another stream question. We have from a Native Zero. Mono update / rework when? Next patch, pretty please. Mike, I'll let you field that. I can chime in on any kind of supplementary info on that as appropriate.
We had a restructuring of this section of the monolith. That was very close to happening for this patch, and it just wasn't quite solid enough. So we pushed that back, and should be coming next season.
Yeah, like ideally that like little rework, and then just like a temper expectations. The rework that Mike's referring to wasn't like a major like overhaul to like what you're doing in the monolith. It's more so just a restructuring of some of the kind of like order of operations there.
Yeah, that's why I specifically bring it up like this screen here, because it's specifically things that affect this screen, specifically this screen. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't want to. Yeah, we don't want to get into details of what that plan is, but yeah, we were real close to getting it in for 1.3. In fact, I think in like a stream chat or interview or something, Judd like talked it up a little bit.
Yeah.
That was like right before we found like, okay, this isn't tight enough to go forward with the time we had left. So we should be coming in with 1.4 because it was working. It just had a couple of kind of like edge cases and kind of like loose kind of parts to it that like, okay, this we don't want to push this forward if we're not like 100% sure on this. Like,
it just needed some more
airtight.
polish.
Exactly. Yeah. So like don't want to promise it's a next patch, but I'd be shocked if it slid like a second patch in a row.
It'll be next patch. I'll fall in that grenade if it's not.
Gotcha. I have a tendency to be more cautious on those, but yeah.
I'm wrong enough. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh, don't tell yourself short. And I'm going to do one more stream question before popping into the Eagle and Pon Poco zone for another bit to kind of start weeding those out a bit more. We have from Mr. Ben Diesel, when can we expect a melee-focused class or mastery?
Like a new one?
Don't want to speak for Mr. Ben Diesel, but I feel like the intention is new one, but I feel like a rework to existing one to be more melee focused would kind of fit that criteria as well.
Yeah, so the focus for class and mastery changes. So we're not adding a new class or mastery next patch, I'll tell you that. And the focus for which classes and masteries get updates in Season 4 will be focused more around which ones are missing skills in this screen. As you can see, Necromancer, Lich, Acolyte, Warlock, all these are full. So you probably won't see a new focus there this time.
Good answer, Mike. I will say, as a melee enjoyer, I am excited at any kind of like indications that we are adding some more melee support. I was very happy to see Flay introduced to the Lich this past patch. I haven't gone too far with my Flay Lich build yet, but I am excited that Acolyte got more melee options like that. So I am on Ben Diesel's side. I am excited whenever we add more melee. All right. Gonna bump up back to the Eagles and Pon Poco zone for a little bit to go chip away at those a bit more. From Eagles Forever, we have, will we get to meet / interact or get artifacts from Terra's other family that she mentioned? And just getting a little more kind of context on that. One of the little gives in the Temple of Terra is she makes a very kind of like light reference to the fact that her and the Observer have siblings. So, fun thing about that, I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the Vault of Uncertain Fate, the reward at the end of Lila's Arbor, the door with the big face on it where you go in and you like deposit gold and it gives you rewards at the end of it. So the Vault of Uncertain Fate is actually an example of one of those artifacts related to one of Terra's siblings who isn't the Observer, and I honestly forget if I included the actual name drop of that being in any of the dialogue from The Lost Spriggan, but that being's name is Dirium, and they are intended to kind of have a domain over like desire and want and value, and the kind of idea of you value gold, and thus it transmutes gold into other things that you value, which are the items you get. So the Vault of a Certain Fate is actually an existing example of a creation of a being that is, part of a Terra's family that isn't a Terra or the Observer. So we actually already have one of those in there. That's one of the kind of little sneaky kind of like lore expansions that we slipped in there when we were adding in those dungeons. So there could be
I
other
had no idea about
like,
that one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why there's that face with the horns on the front of that door, is because that's supposed to be a depiction of Dirium. And yeah, so that is one example, and there, when the Elysians fell, and especially when the Temple of Terra fell, all these kind of relics of the Elysians, like civilization and their creations, especially Terra's siblings, they are buried and hidden, and some are dead, some are dormant, some are missing. It is definitely a space to explore whenever the kind of headlining, like conflict of, Orbis and Terra, that whole like storyline is finished whenever we put out our last bits of campaign and some additions to end games. So the story right now is very much focused on Terra and the Observer, especially with how the Observer turns into Orbis and everything that comes from that. Once that storyline is wrapped, that kind of opens us up to kind of exploring some of these other mysteries in the setting, and Dirium is one of them, and especially any other of the Terra siblings that we haven't alluded to yet. So very good question from Eagles. I was very excited to actually talk about the that little background of the Vault of Uncertain Fate, since that's been something that's kind of been in the back pocket for a long time now.
Nice.
Okay, yeah. Now down to Pollen Poco. When a Terra concentrated her power on Orbis, the temple collapsed and appears many people, humans or Elysian, as per the earlier question, Elysians are human, or just a civilization of humanity. In cryogenic sleep, when many people in cryogenic cryogenic sleep fell with it. There we go. Were they unharmed, faced with head bandage? So I will say that there were a lot of people in that cryogenic sleep in the temple, and definitely not all of them survived when the temple fell. And in fact, like shortly after the temple hit the ground of the ancient era, the ones who did survive, many of them, woke up and, went out into this world that wasn't quite ready for them to, into the, like dominion of these gods who weren't quite ready to lead them. And without any memories of the old world and none of the plans that Terra had for introducing them to this new world ready, that kind of sets the stage for a lot of how humanity kind of first re-enters and expands within the world. So yeah, not everyone survived that fall. So a lot of high casualty events. But that being said, there were a lot of humans in the temple that both survived the fall but also didn't wake up. And that's why when you see the Ruined Era Temple of Terra, there are a lot of like void husks in there, because whenever Orbis is freed in the temple and corrupts it fully in the Ruined Era, some of those humans that managed to like be lucky enough to survive in their cryogenic sleep this whole time, ends up getting corrupted by the void here at that last minute, which kind of makes a lot extra tragedy there. So yeah, a lot of people died. Short version.
We are piling up quite a lot of questions. So maybe if we can, I don't know, try to be a little bit. We may have to be a little bit less verbose on some of these answers. I don't know if there's some of them are quick ones to answer. That I guess I could look at them.
Okay. One thing I could do there is what I can do is I can lightning round the Eagles and Pompoko sections and just gonna give those off our plate, and then we can steamroll through the stream questions.
I think maybe actually doing the opposite and going through the stream questions faster. And like let's stick with some lore questions on both of these two ones for a little bit, and then I'll try and hit a bunch of the non-lore questions just really fast after.
Okay, gonna bounce back to the stream questions then, and we can chew through a few more of those. Okay, last one we left off was we just did Mr. Ben Diesel, and we answered that by the melee question. So next we have V_C_, and that is, hi Mike, Orbis and Terra, who is evil and who is good? Oh man, that's the kind of question that it's funny to get to after the let's be less verbose on these. So that is a complicated question. I will say, in the most kind of basic sense, Terra is good and Orbis is evil, but they come to those from very kind of human angles. Terra is good but flawed. She was a bit too controlling in regards to how she wanted to treat the Observer, a bit too, like, ambitious, controlling, like not. She's trying her best and didn't quite get there. And the Observer, before he fell into becoming Orbis, he was lonely. He was resentful. He, there's a lot of human emotions going there, but how he let those fester within him turned him into what would definitely be called evil. So Terra good, Orbis evil, but the things that are going to get them there and the things that can add texture to those makes that more complicated than just pure good and pure evil, I would say.
Nice.
And next we have from Blitz War with 2 capital Z's. I'm really tired of dying from enemies across the screen when trying to put something in the Nemesis egg, so please be immune or pause the game when interacting with it. Mike, thoughts there?
We can't, the short answer is no. We can't do an immunity situation like that because you could, it would be very abusable. And then we can't pause the game in online yet. As soon as we're able to pause the game in online, we will. That is something we really want to do. It does pause in offline, but it doesn't pause there in offline. We could probably pause it there in offline though. But yeah, sorry, you're gonna have to. We've been trying to put in lots of ways to make sure you're aware that something's aggro to you when you are in a full screen UI menu, audio and visual cues now. But right now it's the best we got.
Yeah, the short version, we want to have a solution there, but it's not an easy solution because there's a lot of abuse cases with the easy solutions.
Yeah.
All right, next question from Guido BT Dub. We have, why is the Wildfire Embers Amulet Prolif so weak? Mike, could you tell us?
It's well, it's not the same as the Warlock Proliferate functionality. It's a different system, and it doesn't do what a lot of people expect it to do, and it might be underpowered, but we're sticking to the lack of balance changes in between cycles. Seasons, sorry.
Good answer, Mike. Is there a chance for it to be changed at the next patch?
Yeah, there's always a chance for it to be changed. If you want to see a change, drop it in the suggestions channel on our Discord.
Let's pump that Prolif up.
Spread.
Our spread. Oh, it's same difference, right?
Nah.
Okay. Yeah, you're definitely more in the technical side than I am. So.
I think that's where the confusion happened.
All right. So from X Genosuk X, why are the mages exiled? What did they do? What's in the box? So the exiled mages are definitely one of those examples of a kind of a plot thread that is seeded by their initial introduction into the game that we want to explore in the future. We have no kind of like hard time on it. We want to do a sort of Rune Mages expansion, Exile Mages expansion, to kind of dive into that more, but that's something that I'm definitely interested in diving more into. The short version is that there is a group of Rune Master judges that have been researching this sort of magic for these kind of pocket spaces and other making other spaces within the world, and part of their main kind of application of that you can see is them putting their enemies into these boxes and shunting them out into random spots, in time and space to where they won't be, a problem for them anymore. And part of that process does have a tendency to drive the mages inside of there a bit nutty and a bit hostile to, everything around them. So some of them are deserving of their fate due to, magical crimes they've done. Some of them were just got on the wrong side of the wrong Rune Master judge, and that's something that I do want us to explore in the future in one of our later content updates, is kind of digging into that more, maybe seeing some of the Rune Master judges and kind of getting more into the nature of these Rune Master prisons.
Sweet.
Okay, next,
which is why they attack everything and not just the player.
Exactly. A lot of the process of being stuffed in that magic box for so long definitely messes with their minds a bit. It makes them a bit hostile to everything around them once they're finally free. So next we have from Parzival's TV. Hi, Mike. Hi, Kyle. Awesome new chapter. Thank you. Question 1 is for Kyle. You said that there will be 12 chapters, but you're in Mall of the Fate that says chapter 14. So how many there will be? Question 2 for Mike. Can the observer boss fight become new boss for in-game bosses? It was awesome fight. Thank you. For question 1, it should not be saying chapter 14.
Yeah, this is I think I know what's happening here, and I think this is generating this number automatically based on
why is that saying 14? That's
because
not good.
the chapter you're in is the Monolith chapter, which is just like in the list of scenes after after like all the other chapters have their scenes put in, and then chapter M is Monolith.
Gotcha. And if anything, we should have that changed to say chapter 13, because I always like to think of Mall of the Fate as the end game as a whole as the 13th chapter. So I've always thought of Monolith and end game as the 13th chapter. So if anything, we should change that to get it to not have that header of Mall of the Fate there.
Or just like say that it's outside of.
Yeah. Either one of those. I'm always blasting too hard when I'm actually like playing. I'm just completely gonna glazed over that whenever I'm this far in the game.
That's definitely a mistake. So good catch.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Because if anything, I would say that should be chapter 13 because you're in game, or we should just not have a chapter header for when you're in it, that in game portion of the game. Okay, and over to question 2 for Mike. Can the observer become a new boss for in game? It was an awesome fight. I have an answer for that as well, but I'll let you hit that first since it was targeted towards you.
Just submitting a bug report here.
Oh, good call.
I can't tell everyone else to do it, not do it myself if I'm in game.
Fair.
All right. There's no technical reason why we can't do that. I guess the only thing is there a lore reason we can't do that, Kyle?
Okay, I can give some, like, both, like, a little bit of lore answer to that, and also a, so, but part of our history of being a small company that has become, not as small is, especially for the, like, people who've been with the company for, like, as long as Mike and I have, we have a tendency to wear a lot of hats. I'm more involved in encounter design than, like, you would usually expect. No, not crazy involved, but just like I'm in the calls a lot with encounter design. One of the big reasons why we don't have an in-game fight is because a big theme with the observer's fight is that he is not actively targeting you until that second phase. He's more so targeting those windows, and you are trying to survive and react to the chaos going on around him from him losing control of his power. And a fight structured like that, like, a lot of the encounter team felt that would be hard to translate into a satisfying way into, like, an in-game level of difficulty. And another part of that is a lot of the fight has tied to it, like the pacing of it goes, where, like, there's that long intro, there's that little kind of intermission with, like, the larger window that pops up, there's him going from window to window. There's a lot of parts of the fight that are not just pure encounter, pure, like, combat, and there was definitely a concern that if we just ported that straight into in-game, it would be not as fun to run over and over again compared to a lot of the other in-game due to the amount of sort of, like, quote-unquote RP going on it. That's thinking back to MMO terms where people complain about the RP before boss fights.
I feel like a Woven Echo might be worthwhile, like a variant that didn't have as much of that RP and stuff in there.
True. And so there's nothing saying that we can't add a kind of stripped, I want to say stripped down, but kind of a reworked version of that fight to in-game in the future. It was the kind of thing where, like, we didn't really have it scoped in to make an in-game version of the fight for the 1.8 patch cycle, so especially with how much we'd have to rework for it to get it to work well as an in-game fight. And more on the narrative side, I have ideas of, like, how we could potentially use an in-game version of that fight kind of paired with some, like, non-story versions of the eventual Orbis fight, and I feel like it would be, like, kind of strange to have an observer fight in-game without an Orbis fight kind of accessible, like, to the side / after it. So yeah. That's part of the reason why, like, I didn't push too hard to have us, get an in-game version of that fight. both the kind of scope of essentially making a second fight within that patch cycle, and also there's a little bit of kind of narrative wonkiness with it, and yeah, so.
But there's no major reason from the stance of, like Majasa has reasons why Majasa is not an endgame that is more lore related, right?
I think we've had that question before. There actually aren't. It's just we never. Yeah, the reason why we didn't have a Majasa in game for the longest time was because back when Majasa first came out, our main kind of like rematches in game was through timelines. So we would have to make a whole timeline to feature Majasa at the end of it, and we never quite like bandwidth for that. That's why when we introduced the woven ecosystem, one of the like immediate kind of first kind of ideas like, oh, let's throw a Majasa fight in there. Now that we don't have to like timeline island to build up to her for in-game. So there's no actual lore reason that why Majasa. It's just like a practicality and how much we'd have to add to like lead up to that. Okay, that question took a little longer than I was expecting. We got into the thick of it with that. Okay, next up we have a Heartmut rank. I also
you don't have to.
Umbrella thing on names. Or anyone whose name I mispronounce. For Heartmut Rahaki, thanks for doing these rounds. Oh, you're welcome. A question about Carrion of Creation. What order are these damage changes applied? Skill tree, passives, items? Still see poison damage with the gloves. That's very much a gameplay-ish thing. I'll let Mike hit that.
Yeah, so the item conversions happen when you have multiple ailment conversions on a single effect, on a single ability. The ailment conversions that happen on items happen sort of first and all together, and then the ailment conversions that happen everywhere else happen second and all together. It's a short version.
Good answer.
And if there's something that you think, and there's the one exception to that is Aura of Decay, which doesn't behave. It doesn't look at one of those things, and I can't remember which one. And if you want specifics on this, I think Cyborg was compiling a list of stuff in Ask the Devs earlier yesterday, and I can test individual ones for you if you post it there as well.
Nice. All right. We have a next question from the chat list from Infernal Odin. Season 3 is amazing. Hats off to the team. Thank you, Infernal Odin. And see, I am wondering about the lore / backstory of the lizards and why they exist and the lore around the lizard tails. Thanks again, team. Oh, I think we got this either last lore stream or the one before that. The lizards all are owned by different pirate crews in the Divine Era, and they are used for smuggling goods and just kind of transporting goods, but they're kind of part of their why they use the lizard for that is they have a tendency to get lost. And oh, great timing! This lizard's on screen right now. Perfect. They have a tendency to get lost and show up in unexpected places. So, upside, they are hard to track down by authorities like the Merchants Guild or Leath for intercepting them. Downside, they have a tendency to not show up where they should, and end up in strange places like other eras and the Mall of the Fade out in the weird cosmos and everything. Though there are rumors that they have a tendency to try and converge back at their home island where the progenitor originally lives, some island out in the Western Sea. So that might be something I dip into sometime in the future. But yeah, short answer is they are used for smuggling by the pirates, and they have a tendency to get lost. And for the lizard tails, who knows, that might play into this island that their progenitor is from and where they all want to return. Who knows? And next up, we have again from Mr. Ben Diesel. Can you give us any more info on what we can expect from skill sigils? Will they give us additional skill nodes? Will it give us an additional mini skill tree? Mike, what do you have to say about that?
Skill sigils are a thing that we have told you the name of, and there is an image that was put out on a deprecated roadmap. That is the sum total of what I can say about it. I'm sorry. It is the complete absence of an answer, and I apologize. But yeah, right now it is lips are sealed. Can't say anything about it. It's gonna be sweet though, which I know
I'm
is like
excited.
the worst thing to say when I've given no information about it.
Well, what I can say is I'm excited for them. Next we have from Winder 007. Sorry for off topic, but this question is for Mike. Are you second guessing the decision to not have the tester program with streamers and the amount of bugs that are apparent?
No, I think the effect of that was very minimal at most, and it's really hard to see into something so opaque like that from and draw conclusions on what it is. So I think there's a lot of rhetoric that's happening around about the effect of that, and I think it's well-meaning, but unfortunately without the right information, so it's inaccurate.
Alright, good question. Move on to the next one. From Sammy Tang. What happened to Zarek? And why did Heorot and Raya turn on each other? So Zarek joins up with the Immortal Empire fairly early on from its inception, which starts in like not too long after the Divine Era, quote unquote ends, and one of the kind of major things he assists with is taking Majelka for the Immortal Empire. And even though Majasa has been dead for a while by then, the Diamond Matrons, the Diamond Nagasa that still run the city, still make it a hard place to conquer and take. So Zarek ends up being scoured by some wind magic from the Diamond Matrons. So he gets that messed up as part of the Immortal Empire's taking of Majelka very early in the Imperial Era. So that's what happens to all his skin. And why did Raya and Hera turn on each other? Pretty much there is a long simmering kind of discontent between the gods in the absence of Atera kind of keeping them all in line and cooperative. And that is the most apparent with Heorot and Raya. Heorot is more compassionate and more self-sacrificing in regards to helping out his dominion, his charges. Raya is more kind of goal-oriented, a bit more ruthless, and he sees Heorot as weak and not fulfilling his duties properly by being so willing to be so compassionate and merciful to things. And that kind of comes to the head the most in regards to Mordentus, Heorot's son, that he has to get help from the other gods to imprison. And Raya advocated for Heorot to straight up kill Mordentus. Heorot didn't, and that was the kind of thing that told Raya that, Heorot is hopeless in regards to, being blinded by his own mercy and compassion. So that is the short version there. Moving on to Hartmut Reiki. Question for Lore. What would you point to as an influence in your storytelling? Any specific story, book, or show? Oh, there's a lot. It's the kind of thing where the easy answer is everything I've consumed, storytelling wise. But I think some of the most influential ones are, I haven't thought about this series in a long time. I was big into the Malazan Book of the Fallen series way back when. I never finished it, which I still feel bad about. I got, I think, partway through the 6th book, and I think there's 10 total. So, and I just read them all in a row. So got a partway through the 6 out of these 1,000-page books back to back to back, and I took a break from it and never came back. It's been 10 years. I really need to go back and finish it. But I really, really liked how the Malazan Book of the Fallen, by Stephen Erickson, I should mention the author's name, by Stephen Erickson. I really loved how there's just this big setting, lots of mechanics, and just aspects of the setting that he just doesn't tell you unless it is relevant to what's going on and that the characters would actively talk to each other about. It's the kind of thing where it feels like you're unraveling this mystery, and the mystery is, what is even the setting? Because all the characters act like they live inside of it and don't feel the need to explain things to, the reader, because they all act natural in their own kind of world as far as talking about things to each other. There's plenty of other stuff, but that's one that immediately jumps to mind as a fantasy series that definitely left an impression with me.
I'm gonna answer this question too because I feel
let's,
like
yeah.
it.